Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's a Thursday, and I'm joined by John Paul Mason. How are you doing, JP?
I'm just about thawed out after last night. It was a cold one at Celtic Park. Very cold.
Tremendous crowd, though, JP. I was saying that a couple of times last night after the game. Under the circumstances with the temperature, Wednesday night, fantastic crowd.
Yeah, no, and it could have been better. I saw someone putting up on Twitter that we should have that scheme where you can resell your season ticket. I really don't get why that doesn't exist. I don't know how difficult that could be to do, because I had a spare ticket last night that went to waste. I asked about 8 folk and nobody could go. I mean, fair enough, it was short notice. I just realised I had it. My pal Paul works with Lewis Capaldi, and he's away on tour with him. Like, he works for his backline crew, and I had this season ticket, and it's in the row in front of me, and I just couldn't shift it. So things like that, do you know what I mean? Like that could have gone to somebody that was desperate for a ticket that I didn't know. Do you know?
No, this is the thing, right? Even in our Acsom WhatsApp group, there were people yesterday asking for tickets, JP, and I think, how would it work? How would it actually work? Would you basically have a computer system, a central hub where JP says, right, that particular ticket's available? Does it then go on sale and you get a credit onto your account? How does it actually work? Because obviously, if I'm ever dishing out my tickets, I'm not looking for anyone to pay for them. I'm just happy for them to go somewhere. But how would that ticketing scheme work? That secondary sale.
I got a ticket for Man United against Aston Villa, where they got beat in the last minute. I think it was Dean Smith's last either last game in charge of Villa or last win in charge of Villa. They got a corner in the last minute, and he's who's that guy? Austin McPhee. He's the set piece king, and then they obviously got instructions to the team and executed exactly what they wanted to do at that corner and scored from it and won the game. So that was not a pleasant return to Old Trafford. But for that game, I got a guy's season ticket, 2 season tickets, and all he did was said he saw that I was looking for one on Twitter, messaged me and said, "Have you got a Man United membership number?" I said yes, and then from that he basically transferred the tickets. It was obviously heavily based on trust, because he transferred the tickets to me, having not yet received the money, and then I just PayPal'd him the money. It was 40 quid for a ticket, so 80 quid for the 2, which is pretty reasonable for Man United Aston Villa game at Old Trafford, I would have thought. But so that's basically how it worked. It was the money doesn't ever enter into Celtic, or wouldn't enter into Celtic. It's an exchange between the 2 fans, really.
Yeah. I mean, it would be easy enough, I think, to have a system, whereby seats become available. There's been sellouts, obviously, in the past where there are some seats available. It could well be people travelling because of weather, or, the change of the time of kickoff, for example, JP, and the fans can't get to the game. I think it's something the club really needs to look at. There is so much to talk about. Actually, here's the thing. This is completely coincidental, but Jake comes in on YouTube to tell us that he actually got his hands on 4 Martin O'Neill tickets. By the way, they're like gold dust right now. There's about 100, I think, on the waiting list. He only needs 3 at the moment. Is it possible to sell one back to people on the waiting list? Jake, best thing to do, email me, pauljohndykes@gmail.com, because I think I've got access to the email addresses of the waiting list. So we'll definitely be able to move that on your behalf. So get in touch with us, Jake, and we'll be able to do that. That's next month. Tomorrow night, it's Brian McClare, Chalky at Gracie's. Really looking forward to that one, JP. But before we get kicked off, we all know how much we love the jerseys, JP. I'm looking at that one over your shoulder. This thing here is not indeed a Celtic jersey, but obviously it's got the shamrock on there. It's an Adidas classic, stripes all the way down the sleeves, JP. They're not interrupted. It has got the trefoil on it, but it's kind of faded. Beautiful V-neck. There's actually a number on the back with the block numbers and all that kind of stuff. It's a concept jersey, and we actually got a bit of artwork commissioned of Alan McInally wearing this, Big Rambo wearing this jersey as if he was a Celtic player, because he did wear something similar when he was at München with all his friends in München. Right. So basically, we're giving this away today, and we ran a wee competition for subscribers. Anybody who subscribes is in it, but we've whittled it down to the 38 shortlist of people who retweeted the tweet last time round, JP. I need a number from you, 1 to 38. And that person will win this jersey. It's a one-off. It's a concept. Don't know who the sponsor is. Don't like the fact that if you do that, you can see more. But, you can run with it. It's a medium. So who's going to win it, JP? 1 to 38.
1 to 38, right? I'm going to pick Mark Burchell's number for Celtic, 27.
27. Listen, this might take a wee while for me to figure out who number 27 is, but I'm going to do it as we're speaking and as we go through. So number 27, yeah, obviously Burchell was close geographically to yourself, and you've seen his rise as a Celtic striker. We'll be talking all things Celtic. Obviously, there's been a couple of games since you were last on, JP, so we'll be looking at them. We'll also be looking ahead to the Morton game, and we'll be announcing a winner of this concept jersey. There's other prizes to come. We gave away a couple of Brian McClare tickets just the other day as well. That's also sold out. Now, Stephen Sloan gets in early on the YouTube comments. We're 10 points and 20 plus goals better off than this time last year, JP. What a time to support Celtic. Enjoy it while it lasts. If we can keep Ange for another 2 to 3 years, it will be a miracle. There's a few comments coming through over the last week or so about Ange, and people start looking ahead, JP. I'm not at that stage yet when I'm thinking about the end of Ange's tenure at Celtic. I can't even think about that. I'm just enjoying it too much.
No, I mean, there's obviously moments where your mind will sort of drift to the future and possible takeover, like not a takeover, but possible change in manager and all the rest of it. But absolutely, you just have to live in the now, as Garth said in Wayne's World, and it's really special. I mean, last night, sometimes those games midweek. In fact, I think you and Laura mentioned it, that it was almost a year on from a game against St Mirren where we lost, and you had Jim Goodwin, the currently much maligned Jim Goodwin, screaming at the sidelines, and Lennon really sort of putting his feet up or whatever he did. I mean, my thoughts on Neil Lennon. I love Neil Lennon, love Neil Lennon, but that was the death rattle of Celtic under him. That game, I think, it was the beginning of the end at that time. And midweek games can sometimes be those games where you just endure them rather than enjoy them. And last night, I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, it was really great football at times. Jota was on song. Kyogo, having just freshly watched that documentary, I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen the Kyogo documentary?
No, I have not.
All right, it's a 22-minute FIFA-produced documentary that is online. You can watch it for free online. Kind of wish it was a bit longer, to be honest, because I would have thought that there was scope for it to be longer, but 22 minutes it is, and you get a bit of an insight into his history, his personality, his character, and that it definitely does mean a lot for him to play for Celtic. He describes at one point he's asked about the fans, and he says they give us such power. Their voices are like the wind at our back. That's what he says. And
I love that.
That's great, isn't it?
I know, I love that. I wasn't aware of it, JP. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. That's right up my street. So I'll definitely tune into that, because
off the back of that, and then seeing him putting in that performance last night where arguably he could have scored a hat-trick, unselfishly squared it to James Forrest. I mean, I've not seen that back. You may have seen it back, and I would imagine it probably is offside if it was deemed offside by VR, but it was a really good finish from Forrest as well, who looked good last night when he came on, as obviously did Turnbull. And as you pointed out last night, it's actually quite frightening. Turnbull has gone from being a mainstay in the team to a guy that's on the outside looking in, and it's not really his fault. You can't really blame the manager for going with the midfield that he's had at his disposal since January last year, because obviously Turnbull was out. And as you pointed out as well, he's one of the best young Scottish footballers around, and he's 23. Realistically, could and should be staking a claim to start games, but he just can't get in at the moment. You've got Moy coming in and producing the goods as he did at the weekend. I thought he was brilliant against Kilmarnock at Hampden in a really, really tough pitch in horrendous conditions for the fan and the players. It was brutal. You saw how much he was absolutely knackered by the end of that game on Saturday. I watched him come over to take a corner, and he put everything into it on a heavy, heavy pitch. And that's a guy that, if you remember his debut, I think it was in a friendly against Blackburn, maybe. And the comments after was like, "Oh, why have we signed this Moy guy? He looks like he's towing a caravan." And everyone just immediately making a judgment on the guy after 40 minutes of football, as a lot of people are wont to do. But I think he's a prime example of don't make a snap judgment on a player based on the initial thing that you see. I mean, he's proven, he's got the whole stadium almost singing his name now. Like, you've got the boys at one side and the Green Brigade at the other, giving it Aaron Moy back against each other. So, I mean, that was almost unthinkable after his first few appearances, and certainly after his last appearance against St Mirren, where again he was hung out to dry, and it was his fault, in a lot of people's eyes for that game. But I was glad to see that they didn't produce the same performance that they did against us at St Mirren Park. I mean, Curtis Main wasn't allowed to do what he did to us in the last 20 minutes of that game, where he just ran the show. We had the defence looked comfortable, and for all Starfelt, again, absolutely filleted by Hugh Keevins on Super Scoreboard. When Keevins saw that, I was listening to it on the way into the game, and Keevins saw the team sheet, he was like, "Oh, I don't know about that. Kobayashi making his debut. He would want to make his debut alongside someone a bit more reliable than Carl Starfelt." And you're like, Carl Starfelt's been responsible for this excellent defensive record. It's not all Carter Vickers. There's no way you can put it all.
This is the thing. People say things without any foundation, JP, and that is when I do like to see some data getting wheeled out, because the perception there of being a bomb scare, a lot of people share it, it's got to be said, but when somebody is going on to a very popular mainstream radio channel, they need to be able to back up. They can't just say things, they can't. They really can't. Just say stuff. Exactly. And what you would hope is that they're going to have a strong enough opinion about a player, good or bad. Back it up. I mean, one pass went astray last night, but everything else that Starfelt did, I thought he did very, very well. And like you say, he is and I was looking forward to seeing him playing on his favoured right-hand side. We'll get in about the debut boy as well, because I was very impressed with that. But you mentioned a couple of things there. Firstly, the St Mirren game, which was a real low point in that whole first year of Acsom streaming. That and Ross County, Ferencváros getting beat 4-0 from Rangers. There were a few, but that was up there. That was a really, really sore one to take. And I remember at the time...
4-1, I'm sure.
What's that?
I'm sure we got a goal in that game. I think it was 4-1.
Oh, the 4 was it? Did we get a goal?
You said 4-0. I think
I did.
It was 4-1 at Ibrox. I can't remember who scored for us.
I'm going to look back on that, because
it was inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, but yeah, I'm pretty sure we scored in that game.
Yeah, well, there's the thing, JP, right? Because the other day there, I was going on about goals that are lost to the depths of time, and what I meant was things like Jota at Fir Park, and then Maeda against Kilmarnock. Great goals that are not, they're not ever going to be like, Little Z's never going to be like retweeting them and all this kind of stuff in years to come. There's a goal that I've completely forgot we even scored. I'm going to have to go back and check that. And I covered the game and spoke about it after the game.
I was on the aftermatch, and I remember just before we went live, you went, "Hold on to your hat, it's going to get a bit fiery in here." And then obviously it was just wild, with a concoction of Celtic fans losing their mind over what they'd just watched, and fans of that team coming in to gloat, of which they probably numbered many.
Yeah, you're right. I will look back on that and enjoy the goal. It's like the 2 goals we scored against Rangers when they beat us 4-2, and it was a New Year's Day game. And at that point, that's when the fans really turned on the board.
Was that not the band? Further back, 4-2 at Ibrox when it was that when Lambert got his teeth smashed in. And Berkovic scored. Albert scored for Rangers.
Berkovic done a funny chicken dance after he scored one of the goals. Can you remember that?
I think it was. Is it not an homage to Ian Wright?
Probably it. Chicken Tonight. He done the advert, didn't he? Yeah. That all makes sense now. These are goals that are forgotten, largely because they're not on the highlights reel at the end of the season. But I'm going to have to go back and look at that for sure. But that St Mirren game, I do remember it was the difference in approach from Goodwin, who basically barked his way through 90 minutes, and Neil Lennon, who didn't really get involved in that side of things. And I remember people looking back on the last time that St Mirren had beaten Celtic at Celtic Park, and it was back in 1990. They beat us 3-0. So it was really bringing it all home to us just how bad we were at that time. Last night, there was a wee bit of talk about this is the only team that's beaten Celtic domestically. And I'm looking at that as well, thinking, it was a proper one-off. We made a lot of changes last night. We made a lot of changes in Paisley, or Love Street, as Peter Grant was calling it last night. We made a lot of changes at Love Street. But last night we were a completely different beast. But you've mentioned Turnbull, and I want to touch on that just as you brought it up, JP, right? Because he comes in against Kilmarnock and he's involved in Giakoumakis' goal, right? Obviously, it was his shot that was parried. Giakoumakis is very good at putting it away. He comes on last night and he scores a brilliant goal. I mean, superb. The quality of the goals that we're scoring is frightening. And it's a tremendous bit of technique. And you think to yourself, what other 23-year-old in Scottish football can do that? David Turnbull's a special, special talent. But it's easy to forget that when you look at the Celtic team, the fact he can't really get in and hold down a place. But when you look at the timing of it and the circumstances around it, he gets injured, having been picked every single time he was available for Ange, right? And then when he's injured, we're not in for Matt O'Reilly. We're in for the 3 Japanese signings, 2 of whom are midfield players. And you're looking at that thinking, well, one of them might hit the ground running, but, it might take them a while to settle, etc. Obviously, Ideguchi hasn't got started. Hatate, he came into the side and he's never really looked back. So that was one thing that Turnbull was going to face. But then we get presented with Matt O'Reilly, who's a player that we didn't expect to sign. He's presented to us, we sign him. And then the impact he's had is probably better and bigger than anybody expected. So Turnbull then comes into that environment where there's another 2 midfielders who weren't there before. And then since then, we've signed Moy and we've signed Iwata. Yeah, I know they don't specifically play in Turnbull's role, Iwata anyway, but he's now facing a situation where he's maybe got 4 guys ahead of him before he gets the start. But he comes on and he reminds everybody of what he can do. Did it bother you last night? Because I remember Ryan Christie scoring a goal in that season, that ill-fated season, and he didn't celebrate. All of a sudden, we all had theories around that. Did it bother you last night that David Turnbull didn't really crack a smile after his goal?
I mean, it didn't bother me, as in I didn't get annoyed about it or anything. I was just more. My initial thought was, well, we're 3-0 up. He scored the 4th. Ultimately, he's not going to run around giving it, George Cadet with the finger out and all that, giving it that. I can't see a player doing that despite the quality of the goal. I think it was maybe more kind of nonchalant. All right, okay, I've scored a great goal. It's only the 4th. I think there was a couple of smiles with teammates when they came over. I watched him quite intently after he walked away because I was like, uh-oh. And then as players came over to him, it's hard for me to see. I mean, it's quite a bit away looking at the centre circle and trying to see someone's expression on their face. But I'm sure I saw him smiling with a few of his teammates. So,
Tommy Rogic didn't really celebrate that often. No. I know he did against Aberdeen in the Invincible Cup final, but generally we just walk away and have a wee grin on his face,
Yeah, I saw he scored again the other night for West Brom in a 4-0 victory, so he's getting his numbers up down there. But no, the Turnbull thing, I there maybe is a bit of. You can understand why there'd be a bit of frustration on his part, but I certainly don't think it's toys out the pram or anything. I think it was just a kind of nonchalant. Well, there you go, have that. Here's what I can do, and it was a great finish. Thankfully, not one that could be checked by VAR, as all the rest of them seem to be, which is hugely annoying, as you spoke about last night in the post-match, where it kind of curtails celebrations a bit. because you don't really get to properly celebrate a goal, and then there's the wait, and then you have to G yourself back up to celebrate again, and it kind of feels like you're full celebrating a goal which hasn't actually happened. And I'm not. Again, we're so new to this. This is what we're a month and a half into VAR, and it doesn't. I get why it worked last night in terms of those goals. In another day, the flag would have stayed up, and we would have never known until we watched the highlights back and we're like, wait a minute, he was onside. So it did work in our favour last night, and that's going to happen so often with the way that we play because we're so fast, and there's constantly going to be shouts for offside, and it's going to be very, very tight, as you could see with the Maeda goal against Kilmarnock on Saturday. I mean, Kyogo's heel off. Was it Kyogo's heel offside? I mean,
Have you seen the Forest one last night? The margin's even finer. That's even finer. It's when you look at it back, it's so unfortunate. I mean, we're going to unfortunately have to speak about VAR because obviously it has played a part in the last couple of games, so we will be touching on that as well. But one last word on David Turnbull. It didn't help that he got sent off and missed a couple of games through suspension as well, JP, at that time. But I just think that, there's been comments made by Ange recently in relation to game time. Nobody comes to Celtic and is guaranteed game time. Don't come to this club if you think you're guaranteed a game. And I think sometimes managers can put a message out when they're even talking to the press, and that message is actually meant for the players as well. So everybody instantly thinks, Giakoumakis, he's talking about Giakoumakis, right? And he probably is to a degree, but there's another few players who might be in that bracket, and Turnbull might be one of them. I mean, Moritz Jens, he's been brought in on loan. He now looks surplus to requirements. Stephen Welsh sat on the bench last night. He makes a reappearance, even though the club have made it known that they're going to be listening to offers for him in the January transfer window. So there's maybe a few players who feel a bit disgruntled at the fact they're not getting game time. And I think sometimes it's good for Ange to put that message out, JP. Nobody's guaranteed a game in this team.
No, I mean, knowing what we know about Ange Postecoglou now, I think there's every chance that the players are well aware of that, even if they maybe secretly harbour desire to get guaranteed game time. It's not something that's just going to be dished out to them without any substance. Kyogo, for example, is currently the number one striker and probably undroppable. I don't know how you could possibly even contemplate dropping Kyogo, despite whoever is knocking on the door. If there was a couple of other strikers, Giakoumakis and one other, I don't really know how they could put together a legitimate argument to get on that pitch ahead of Kyogo, because he's just frightening at the moment, and his numbers are already. He said, I think his target in that documentary, his target for his first season was to score 10 to 15 goals.
Right.
And he got 20. So he's already on 18 this season, and we're still in just after the middle of January. So what is his target now? I don't think he'll reveal it, but what is his target now? So yeah, guaranteed game time. And I think it was Tony, Celtic Trends, Tony put out a thing about Kobayashi this morning and basically said people think that they know Ange Postecoglou's side, but they don't. And we don't. It's really hard to second guess what team he's going to put out. I mean, nobody would have said last night, we'll have Juranovic at left back. And maybe wouldn't have even thought Kobayashi would start. And no Cameron Carter-Vickers in the squad at all. Nobody knew that was coming. Nobody knew that he was injured until the moment that the squad was announced. So that also tells you that it's quite watertight in terms of leaks. And normally you would have, if something like that's happened, you'd know about it the morning of the game or the day before or something. But it's all very kind of, here's the team. And it's all interchangeable. There's players can play all over the place. You can swap out the front three all around. The Kyogo can play out wide as well. So, and then the midfield as well. There's so much, as we've been saying about the Turnbull situation, there's so much quality in the midfield that you don't really know what the midfield's going to be. Moy drops out last night. Maeda drops out last night. Two of our best performers at the weekend are left out of let's face it, a must-win game. and 2 of our best players from the previous game are benched, and we've got the quality to bring in replacements that allow us to get a comfortable 4-0 victory.
Mm-hmm. And you know the thing as well, I'm always a great advocate, JP, of bringing youth players through, giving them a chance. It's traditionally it's the Celtic way. It's the way that Celtic have always done things. There's always been a core group of players that know the club, have come through the academy, and but I'm looking at that team last night and I'm thinking, right, so you would need to be exceptional. You would really need to be an exceptional talent, and then for there to be an exceptional set of circumstances for you to get a sniff at that team at the moment. And whilst I would love to see more game time for the likes of Rocco Vata, for example, I know Boss and Lawel has been getting really, really good reviews, and there's teams interested in taking him out on loan in January, etc. There's teams sniffing around Rocco as well. It's going to be tough at this moment in time to bleed these players into the team. I think that's going to be a big challenge, but it is one that I think, Anne just touched on. He says maybe in 6 months' time, some of them will be closer to the first team squad. But, if David Turnbull, who, like I said last night, and I totally believe it, he is one of the most exceptional Scottish talents in the game at his age, 23 years of age, and he is struggling to get game time. So people say to me about, Scott Robertson, he's playing well when he plays for the B team, like he did the other night against Wolves, for example. He didn't get a chance. Where does he fit in? And it's nothing personal against Robertson. I thought he performed really well when he played against Cluj in Europe. Remember, away from home, teamed up with Cham, and he played really, really well as an 17, 18-year-old. But he's not going to get in that team. If David Turnbull can't get in that team, a B team player, unfortunately, they're just not going to get through at this moment in time. So you hope that there is a plan in place. And I think Ange will be working away behind the scenes on that plan. But with regards to VAR, here's a thing, and the minute a Celtic supporter talks about VAR or a decision going against you, JP, and I've seen it in the mainstream media, they just pull out the corruption and the paranoia cards and all this kind of stuff, right? And it's almost as if you can't have an adult conversation with people about this. But, we were talking about it to such a degree that, we were talking about bias. That is basically what we're talking about on the bulletin with regards to Goldson's handball, the handball at Hearts, the various different issues that we were having. Some of the goal at Fir Park, it was just an absolute stramash, to use a famous Scottish term, that we didn't even have the VAR camera watching the game. The whole thing was shambolic. And then eventually it's called out by Big Ange. And he calls it out. And then since he's called it out, we've had the Giakoumakis penalty shout that Colin waves away. And then last night we see VAR actually getting used for what it was introduced for. And yeah, when you watch the Forest go back, you might say, by the way, that should have stood. But overall last night, it kind of worked the way it should have worked. I'm not going to say it worked in our favour, JP, because if the goal's a goal, it just worked. Aye. And I'm asking you the question, is it a coincidence that all of a sudden it started working after it's been called out? Because I think you turn the screw a wee bit on the authorities. I mean, I've not heard Crawford Allen coming out. There was a marginal Kobayashi offside decision against Hearts that went in our favour, and he comes out and makes a statement.
Kyogo.
What did I say? Kobayashi. Furuhashi. I'm getting there. Kyogo, but he's not came out. Crawford Allen's not came out as a spokesperson. He's just basically remained anonymous, which then allows everybody to have a go at his referees. And rightly so, because
they don't comment on individual moments. They don't comment, but yet they had the referee and decided to comment on that one.
Yeah.
Quite high profile on the BBC or whatever media platform it was on. He wasn't doing it whispering in the corner somewhere. It was all over the media, that comment and that statement. I don't know if it was Ange putting pressure or if it just shows the pretty scatty nature of VAR in our country at this moment in time, whereby you could say it's teething problems, or you could say it's them getting to grips with it. Some people were suggesting that Willie Collum didn't give the penalty for Kilmarnock to have because it would have been too controversial. Or what if I give that penalty?
Having chopped off 2 goals for Celtic.
Yeah, so he's actually looked at it and thought, that is a penalty, but I'm not going to give it, because he's basically scared to or whatever. I mean, I can't possibly think that is the case. There's surely no way that a referee's going to see 100% penalty in his eyes and then not give it. I think he's obviously looked at it and thought there's not been enough in it to give the penalty. In my mind, if it was at the other end of the park, I would have been looking for a penalty for that. I'm not going to just sit here with green specs on and say, all right, okay, I don't think it was a penalty. I think there was enough in it to
warrant. Very clumsy. It's very clumsy.
Of course it was. There's no two ways about it. And I was relieved that we didn't concede it, because I thought if they score that, we've got to endure another half an hour of this freezing cold, swirling sideways rain, and it's another half an hour for the players on the pitch. Ultimately, I think we would have taken care of Kilmarnock, given the strength of what we'd brought off the bench, as Giakoumakis proved with a goal. He had a goal in him, and he was off the bench. And I think we would have proved too strong for them. However, it would have almost certainly meant it going to extra time and another half an hour in the legs, which I think if another half an hour on that pitch would probably almost be the equivalent of 90 or 60 on a decent pitch, because the pitch was so poor. It would have taken a lot out of. I mean, I'm sure it took a lot out of Rangers and Aberdeen on Sunday, playing on that on an even worse version of the pitch that we played on, and they played 120 minutes. So,
well, Ange said that Carter Vickers and Giakoumakis were not involved last night because of fitness issues or slight strains or whatever it may have been. They weren't fit last night. It might have been, obviously, Giakoumakis only had about 12 minutes or whatever it was, but it might have been obviously the fact that it was a very heavy pitch, like you say, JP. I'm really interested in this stat here, right? So it's a certain Celtic player's birthday today. We've been talking about Turnbull, who's 23. Another Celtic player turns 23 today. Born on this day in 2000, Stephen Welsh. So you look at, Stephen Welsh and his progress into the first team, and he is quite sometimes regarded as one of the younger players within the squad and all this kind of stuff. Yet you expect the world from David Turnbull at times to come on, even though he's of the same kind of era as Welsh. Now, this has given me, at that time when Welsh was born, right? We're in the Barnes era, right? We're in that the real tail end of the Barnes and Dalglish regime. And obviously, Barnes was sacked in February, wasn't he, against Inverness? It was February. Declan will know because it was the same day Declan was born.
Oh, no, I vividly remember it. I was just about to move to France for uni, and I lived in Nice in France for 6 months. And the day that I flew to France was the day that we were playing Hearts at Celtic Park. And when I got on the flight to Nice from London Luton, we were 2-0 up against Hearts at home. And I got off the flight and I phoned home to check the score, and we get beat 3-2 at home. And I remember just going, oh no, that something's badly wrong. And then the following Tuesday, we played the replay against Inverness Cali, which should have been the previous Saturday, but got called off, an hour or an hour and a half before kickoff. And that's when I phoned home to ask my dad the score, and he looked up the teletext and said, Inverness Cali produce biggest Scottish Cup shock. And I was just like, nah, no way.
You winded me up. Oh,
and then I switched off. I didn't look. I was so despondent about the whole situation. I just didn't even bother. I didn't find out that Barnes had been sacked until maybe about a week or 2 weeks later, because obviously you're talking 23 years ago. There was no internet on your mobile phone. No. There was no easy access to information. I had to phone home to get information. Most of my information when I was at home was from teletext, and teletext didn't exist in the south of France, funnily enough. So I kind of felt like I was on a different planet, and some people might say that I was fortunate to be there and not in the absolute maelstrom, if that's the right word, of what was going on at Celtic.
That I did interview John Barnes. The interview is on the channel, on the YouTube channel. It was a few years back now, JP, maybe 4 years ago. I interviewed Barnes. It was a proper to and fro. We went hammer and tongs at bias, unconscious bias. We spoke about racism, and obviously we spoke about his time at Celtic. And he gave us quite a few nuggets of information. There was a wee bit of frustration there for Barnes now looking back on it. And obviously on that particular night with Viduka in the changing room, there's been stories told about him taking his boots off and all this kind of stuff. But Barnes did say that after the game, he went into Celtic Park as normal and he had a meeting. And he no one told him that he was losing his job or any of that kind of stuff. So he came out that meeting thinking, obviously, this is completely unacceptable, but we've survived it. And it was later on that day that he was called back in after there was reports and all the rest of it outside Celtic Park, Sky Sports cameras. He was called back in and told that was him relieved of his duties. But some of the things he told us, like he never actually bought a house up here. He told his wife that there was plans to buy a property, told his wife, let's not do it. After a few weeks, he didn't get the feeling he was going to be here that long. So it's an interesting interview. I must listen back to it because it was a while ago. And there was a few wee bits at the end that we had to snip out of the interview. So I wonder if I've got the original because that was pretty interesting as well.
Stephen Welsh missed all of this because he was
yes,
a young baby boy.
Exactly. 23 years. He's being born when all of this nonsense is happening. And obviously, Dalglish comes in and takes over. We win the League Cup against Aberdeen 2-0. Can you remember who scored?
Tommy Johnston and Vidar Reset.
Love it. Superb.
I mean, I know that because that's the first trophy I ever saw Celtic lift in with my own eyes because I flew back from France, having been there for a month. Mm-hmm. I booked a flight and it was the first time I'd ever been on a flight on my own. And I flew back via London. I think it was on BA actually. I must have borrowed money to do that because I certainly couldn't afford to do that in my own steam. And came back for the cup final. I was back for the weekend, and then I was back in France on the Monday morning for class actually.
Oh, brilliant! And it was such a victory that we released a VHS video of the success.
The folk in my class were like, "You're going back home. You've only been here for a month, less than a month, and you're going back home for a football match." And I was like, "Yeah." Pretty much none of them. There was all different European students. So there was like folk from Sweden and Finland and Germany, and there was some English as well. But I think the German guys was a Dortmund fan in my class, and he was probably the only one that actually got it because he loved Paul Lambert,
right?
Absolutely, because obviously he season ticket holder. He'd watch Paul Lambert play for Dortmund, and he would just rant and rave about Lambert all the time, and told me about them singing "You'll Never Walk Alone" when he did his walk round at the end of his last game, and he actually sent me a patch, like a Dortmund patch that goes on the back of like how like Germans always have patches on their like denim jackets and things like that.
Yeah.
A giant circular Dortmund patch of the Dortmund badge, and a cassette with Dortmund fan songs on it, like actually recorded stuff from the ground. And I sent him, and he ate a scarf as well, a Dortmund scarf. Proper old school like 80s one, and because I gave him my black away shirt, the black one that you associate with that time Vida Reset with Umbro as a sponsor and the lime green thin stripe across it. I had the long sleeved one of that with me, and I gave him that as a gift, and he was so chuffed with it. And then I received this sort of Dortmund fan pack in the post. As a thank you for the swap. So that's one of the main reasons I've always wanted to go and see Dortmund play over there and take in a game at that ground, is just because of that early connection and the connection with Celtic that goes back to the 90s when we played them, and I can remember, I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, and Murdo McLeod back in '87 when he signed for them, and then we drew them in the European Cup, in Europe the following season. But with regards to Stephen Welsh coming into the world just when Celtic were falling to bits pre-Martin O'Neill, and it just shows you how much we were falling to bits, JP, that was the first game you saw with your own eyes where we've lifted a trophy, and then obviously O'Neill comes in 20. Here's a thing for you: who do you think was number one in the charts when Stephen Welsh was born? Welsh band.
A Welsh band? Wasn't it Chumbawamba, was it? No. That's too late for them. They were 90s. Welsh band, Mannix?
It was the Mannix, yes. And they were number one with?
January 2000. It's got to have been something. Is it from If I Told You the Truth? I can't remember the name of the album. The one where they've all got the white suits in the front cover.
The blue cover. It was
Yeah.
the single was The Masses Against the Classes.
Oh, yeah.
Which is as relevant today as it was 23 years ago, right?
Yeah,
I'm going to divert for a wee second. Bear with us, please, and we'll get back to the soccer. Listen, 2000. Check this out for a year in music. Listen to this list of albums, JP. I just don't think we're anywhere near this now, 23 years later. Primal Scream released Exterminator, Badly Drawn Boy, The Hour of Bewilderbeast, Coldplay with Parachutes, booing, hissing and all that. But by the way, decent album. Doves, Lost Souls, Super Furry Animals with Ming, produced by your mate. Radiohead, Kid A, Grandaddy, The Software Slump, Lamb Chop with Nixon, Teenage Fan Club with Howdy. Mate, this goes on. This is 1 year. Elliott Smith with Figure Eight, Richard Ashcroft, Alone with Everybody, Bell and Sebastian, Fold Your Hands, Child You Walk Like a Peasant, The Delgados, The Great Eastern, Paul Weller, Heliocentric, Ryan Adams, Heartbreaker, and Gorky's Zycotic Minky, The Blue Tree. What a year in music. I'm sorry, we're nowhere near that now.
And we never will be again.
That's about 20 tremendous albums, all in the 1 year. Stephen Welsh comes along and messes it all up. Cheers, Stevie. Stevie, lads, come on. Right. Let's get some of your comments. Daniel Hampton, we want to talk about Kobayashi, right? Because in terms of a debut, I mean, he almost scores a goal. He did really well, actually, and it came off the post in the lead up to Abada's goal. Solid game. I think last night I was probably really singing his praises, and then I've read some of the comments this morning about it being a solid enough performance, and some people say he didn't win enough headers, etc. But I was really impressed in the moment watching it last night with his debut, JP.
I mean, for anybody to come in, whatever your nationality and wherever you've played your football before last night, to come in and play your first start and your first minutes for a brand new football club, to come in and play as well as he did last night. And folk will go, oh, well, it was only against St Mirren at home. We didn't win against St Mirren away. So you've got to remember that, and you can't just bury that argument because it's St Mirren at home. Mm-hmm. St Mirren are the only team to beat us this season. So it was a challenge. He was up against a fairly determined and tough-looking front line in St Mirren's strike force. I don't recall the other guy's name, but obviously I'm aware of Curtis Main and what he's all about. So, I mean, Hugh Keevans was predicting misery for Kobayashi before a ball had been kicked, because he's just like, oh, don't know about this guy. You know, he could turn out to be really good, and I just couldn't believe the sort of negativity that was just on show. There was no room for, oh, well, give him the benefit of the doubt and anything. So I think when I first saw him receive the ball last night and make a pass out, he obviously used Juranovic quite a lot because it was on his side, and Juranovic is always pretty available for a pass. Always and actually found a lot of space last night. Mark, the guy that sits in front of me, was pointing out that the way that St Mirren were playing was allowing Juranovic that space. I'm never claimed to be some sort of mastermind on tactics, and I probably never will be, but when he pointed that out, from that moment on, I could see how much space Juranovic was getting. He was constantly in a good bit of space and ready to receive the ball, which Kobayashi, based on Tony's Celtic Trends patter this morning, Kobayashi had the ball the most, or I think he either had the ball the most or received the most passes. One of the two. And you could see that the team were quite comfortable giving it to him. There was no, oh, let's protect him, let's keep him off the ball. If he was the one that received the most passes, then that means that the people in the team, who are the mainstays in the team, were trusting a guy that's just in the door so they've obviously been training with him for the last 3-4 weeks, so they know what he can and can't do. And I was really impressed with him.
Yeah, so was I.
Young guy coming in from Japan, brand new environment, the pressure of playing in front of a really packed Celtic Park on a freezing cold Wednesday night. Again, doubt he'll have been used to those sort of conditions, the weather, I mean. And just new environment. It's sink or swim in that moment, because people make their judgments on players. If he'd had a 5 out of 10 last night, the knives would have been out for him from a lot of the support. Let's be honest about it. There would have been. The people would have been like, as we saw with Starfelt. Starfelt's still recovering from that game, and he's won over a lot of people, definitely. But I'd say he's still recovering from that game in terms of the wider element of the support, who will just refuse to say anything else other than he's a bomb scare or do better. Or, I mean, even Mark that sits in front of me was like, it's a toss-up between Welsh and Starfelt for me. I would be happy if Welsh was to stay or whatever and we were to sell Starfelt. And I'm just like, really? Okay.
That'd be an interesting head-to-head if you got one of the stat guys to actually look at that. Because, I mean, again, like yourself, I watch from a fan's perspective, from an observer's perspective, JP, and I'm very interested in the data. But looking at Stephen Welsh with his aerial duels versus Starfelt, I think Starfelt wins a lot of headers, and Welsh often leads bizarrely with all his weight behind him. You know, he leads behind him to try and win a header, and which means that, you know, that he's never going to get there. The thing with Welsh is I'm a big fan. I've said it time and time again. I would have kept him for the rest of the season and put him out on loan for 6 months and then made a decision between him and Jens. Doesn't look like it's going to go that way. And then you get a new player coming in Kobayashi, who I thought looked very, very composed, used the ball really well. Yeah, it wasn't his biggest test in terms of being under the cosh, but that'll come. And, you know, I think also you made a good point about Juranovic, because one bad performance at Ibrox, all of a sudden Juranovic can't play left back. Well, we know he can. He played quite a few games at left back and he impressed at left back. That was just a really bad day at the office for him. And I thought he was really good last night. But it leads me on to the Juranovic and Giakoumakis, the two players who have probably been in the discussions more than anybody else during this January transfer window, JP. And there's been moments where we thought they're out the door. Then you get Ange saying, you know, Giakoumakis would have played last night if he was fit. He was carrying a wee injury. So really, as fans, you're none the wiser. You know, if there was an announcement this morning just before we came on, or indeed during the bulletin, that one of them was gone, wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. But at the same time, if we get out of January and we've still got both players, that also wouldn't surprise me. Where are we with them? And what do you make of the theory yesterday on the Acsom bulletin in relation to those two players, the contracts, and the fact that, you know, the reason that the transfer fees are so low is because the contracts weren't done with the current incumbent, Nicholson, for example. He wasn't looking after those deals. It was during the CEO time of Dominic Mackay. I don't know. It's not fact. It was a theory that was pitched yesterday, and that's why we're talking about fees that otherwise you would scoff at. You know, $3.5 million for Giakoumakis, for example. You'd be looking for more than that. Juranovic, bronze medal winner at the World Cup, you know, probably has gone through his purple patch there and he's at his peak, and they're talking about transfer fees that you think, well, I'd rather keep him than take that. What's your thoughts on all that transfer talk around those two players?
I mean, the theory that was put forward, I could subscribe to that theory. I wouldn't put all my money on it, but I could subscribe to it. I mean, you could definitely tie it all together and make it make sense in your head that is why Dominic Mackay maybe isn't still in situ at Celtic Park, and that is maybe why we are being presented with these figures when their names are being bandied about for transfers. But at the point of us signing those two players, Giakoumakis, fair enough, had been the top goal scorer in Holland or the Netherlands, and Juranovic was a highly regarded Croatian international, but he hadn't yet played at the World Cup. He hadn't played those games. He hadn't, you know, played for Celtic in Europe. He hadn't, and Giakoumakis, I mean, there was probably a point where most Celtic fans, especially after his penalty miss against Livingston, if you'd been offered $4 million for Giakoumakis at that point, you'd have taken it. So these fees, whilst might seem a little bit derisory, if there was a clause put in at that time, I don't think it's. I don't think it would have been. It would have been mental if whoever was doing those deals at that time was putting in like a £15 million release clause. Because how could you possibly say, oh, well, both these players are going to hit the heights to become 10 to £15 million players? But at the same time, you could also argue that why would you make it so low? Why insert a clause at all? Why would that exist for these two players and make them unique versus? I mean, we don't know what the ins and outs are of the Jota deal or the Cameron Carter-Vickers deal when it comes to them leaving. And somebody commented last week and said, "Oh, you guys just want everybody out the door. Like I need to switch off. I can't listen to any more of this because you're just willing away all our players." And we only mentioned last week that there was maybe we need to look at a possibility that in the future we will have to exist without X, Y, and Z player because, as Echo and the Bunnymen once said, nothing ever lasts forever. So, do you know what I mean? It's
what
you've got. Yeah, well, it is a great tune, but you can't just sit here and naively think that we're going to keep hold of this squad until they're all ready to retire in China or the USA or something like that. These guys are going to have ambitions to play probably in the Premier League, and I would say it would be unfair of us to stand in their way. But we don't know what the deals are in place for them until it comes to a point. Hopefully, not till 2 years down the line, and that's me being optimistic. That then the transfer talk starts about them, and then we start finding out about clauses in their contract, and everyone's like, "Wait a minute, we're going to let these guys go for what?" Like, no way. So it's only because they're in the limelight at the moment that there's so much chatter about their individual contracts and their situations. So we don't know anything about the rest of the team. I mean, it could be that it could be that there's what's the word? It could be that there's red flags for a lot of other players' situations that we've yet to find out about.
Well, the thing is, with that comment about wishing players away, the reason we're talking about it is because Ange said it. Ange said it. And we're obviously opening up that discussion. I'm not wishing any of the players away. The players that I wouldn't mind leaving Celtic are those that are not contributing to the club and they're not part of this team. And you could probably throw in Abelgar and Jens into that mix at the moment. But, Idiguchi, McCarthy, there are players within that squad who are not contributing. And, I wouldn't bat an eyelid if they were to leave the club in January. When it comes to first-team players that you really would have to go out and replace because they're very important cogs in the system, no, I don't want any of them to leave. But I understand what Ange is saying when he says, it will happen. It's just the natural flow. It's a natural order of things that will happen. And we know it does because we've lost so many players that way in the past, going right back to, Virgil van Dijk, Fraser Forster, Victor Wanyama, and it goes on, and we know that. So, yeah, it's not like we would rather not see these brilliant talents at Celtic Park. That's not the case at all. With regards to the theory that was pitched yesterday, the one thing I would say on it, I don't have specialist knowledge about the contracts. Very few people do. But there's one thing for sure, JP. A CEO at Celtic lasting 70 days is unusual. So something is amiss. Something is afoot. And none of us know what it is because we're not part of that bubble. And so that, for me, adds a bit of gravitas to the whole conversation because something went wrong. Something pretty serious went wrong. And obviously, we don't know what it is at the moment. So I'm sure it'll all come out in the fullness of time. I'm really keen also to bring in some more of your comments because, as we often do, we go on little wee diversions now and again. By the way, do you know who sung the backing vocals on that Echo and the Bunnymen track?
Liam.
That man right there. Yeah.
That was a shot in the dark a little bit, but I kind of thought that was the case. Is there not chat of them doing an album together? McCulloch and Liam Gallagher?
Maybe with Squire on the guitars, maybe. Anybody that wanted in the 90s someone to do backing vocals which involved the lyrics, yeah, 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 would bring in Liam because he was the best at that, right? Richard Ashcroft wasn't bad at it either. K Matsu, woodwork denied Yuki a debut goal. Bad woodwork. Yeah, it did. We did score the goal. And, there's going to be a moment at the end of the season. Hopefully not too many of them will be added to this. What about the goals that didn't stand this season, right? So you've got Jota up at Fir Park. Phenomenal goal. The one last night, the team work from back to front, finished by Forrest. And you're just praying that it stands because it's such a thing of beauty. And then obviously Maeda's goal, with the passing movement, superb. Tremendous goal with Kyogo's smart thinking, quick thinking. And they're just going to be lost, JP. It's really unfortunate that, we're not going to... I mean, I will still watch them and still enjoy them. I want to talk about a couple of other players from last night. Alistair Johnston comes back in, and that obviously nudges JJ to the left. But there's two conversations here. Firstly, Alistair Johnston, I don't even know if he's put a foot wrong. I mentioned that wee thing at Ibrox where he was part of the Joe Hart situation where he's lost the ball, but, it didn't result in a goal.
By the way, just on that, I saw that happen last night, whereby when Hart has the ball, he normally, I don't know, maybe it was just a once-off, but I don't think it is. That when he's got the ball, he's normally got three options. And I saw Juranovic sprinting back to be in position to be the third option. And that's what you pointed out, that Johnston wasn't that third option at Ibrox. Therefore, Hart went into an almost like robot malfunction mode where he was just like, I don't know what to do. I've not got the options that I should have. What do I do? And those seconds that he hesitated allowed Morelos to press him and cause the sort of disarray in the goal.
Definitely.
So I saw that last night because obviously it was right in front of me in the North Stand. I saw Juranovic sprinting back to be in position, and I was like, "Oh, that's what he was talking about. That's what Paul was talking about at Ibrox." So
yeah, but I mean, other than that, and that's a tiny, tiny wee moment in three performances that he's now had. JP, I've been really impressed with this.
That was his first game. To be fair,
his debut. And again, over the piece, a fine debut. 3 games under his belt now, and I've been really impressed with him. But then the question starts to arise: is he the first choice right back now? And what's the story with Bernabe? Because I don't, to my knowledge, think he was mentioned last night. I know Ange has spoken about him being more of a long-term investment. We've invested quite a bit in bringing the player over. There's a culture change. There's a change of environment. There's all of these different things that the player needs to get used to. But the performances aren't really, for me, they're not at that level that you would expect, even in his first season, half a season in. And I know that he's not playing week in, week out. He's left out last night. Juranovic plays supposedly out of position at left back. So what's your take on the performances of Johnston? His approach, I really like it. I think he's really well suited to the Scottish game. But also Bernabe. Where are we with Bernabe at the moment? Are people being a bit harsh on him?
I think so. So early in his career. With regards to Johnston, I really, really like him. And I like the way he talks as well. I mean, he's coming. That's exactly what I was just about to say, what Pat Dolan's just said. It does look like he's been there forever. The guy's been here for like 3 weeks, and he's talking last night in the post-match like he's been a player in and around that team for ages. And he's talking about the players that are coming in, and there's always going to be somebody to come in and do something. And he said the squad's so strong, and he's obviously really impressed by the quality that we've got. And I don't think he'd just say that for filler. I think he actually does genuinely believe that. He'll be able to make a call on what he's experienced so far in his career, and then to come in, he'll be like, whoa, this team's brilliant. Like, I'm surrounded by so many like absolutely phenomenal players that it makes my life and my job and my position a lot easier to play. So I think he's definitely cemented himself as a first team player already. And we've spoke about that before, whereby you want to make signings of people that come in and make the jersey their own, not people that come in and just sort of flit in and out of the side. And obviously the things like Abelgard and signings like that, and McCarthy as well. I remember we spoke about McCarthy and being like, well, we'll see what he's done, and ask me that question again in 18 months. Well, here we are 18 months down the line, and McCarthy hasn't done it. And so you could ultimately say his signing hasn't been a success at all. And it's probably been a very expensive signing as well. I mean, he's not been getting a £5 a week for the last 18 months. Do you know what I mean?
The thing with me with that, JP, is some people are, but Anne said he's good behind the scenes. He's good on the training pitch. And I'm thinking, yeah, exactly. I'm sure loads of us would enjoy that for a gig, right? You get paid a hefty wage because you're popular with your teammates. No, if you're not contributing, right? I'm sorry, you're not there as far as I'm concerned, because I think that the people that are good in the dressing room, we had somebody, we could have kept Scott Brown if you just want to pay somebody a wage for being good and influential in the dressing room. And he wouldn't have played much either, but he would have been very influential in the dressing room. I'm not buying that. If a player isn't contributing, we can't keep him at the club. We need, that situation where there's 2 or 3 really fighting for a jersey. You look at the right back. Juranovic is still our player. We've got 3 right backs. We went for years where we couldn't find a right back. Probably from Lustig until when Ralston comes into the team under Postecoglou, and all the right backs in between. JP, not one of them really. I know that Frimpong got sold and we made a big profit on him. I don't think in the pantheon of great right backs he's ever going to be quoted. I think he's a very talented player, but not a right back, and there's loads of others who I've named before. And all of a sudden we've got 3 all vying for that jersey. But McCarthy's not vying for any jersey. There's Ideguchi,
I'm not hating on McCarthy, by the way. I think you can't blame the guy for wanting to make the move to Celtic. It was probably sold to him at the time that he was going to be an important part in the team, and his fitness at the start probably led to him not being able to be that guy that we could rely upon right at the start. And then Andrew's like, right, well, I need to use other players in that position of the pitch. And then when it comes to January, I need to strengthen, and he brings in Hatate and O'Reilly, and there's no quarter given for anybody's allegiances to the club or what they've done before. He brings in a guy from League One and then a guy from Japan who's only played football for 2 years. So, and McCarthy's like 30 and like a seasoned English Premier League player and international, all the rest of it. Your reputation means nothing with that guy. So I would not be surprised if McCarthy does go in the summer. As for Bernabe, I was with Melly from 20 Minute Tims on Saturday and was cajoled into contributing for his At the Match podcast, and we spoke about Bernabe after the game, and he's not convinced either. I thought Bernabe showed a good bit of tenacity towards the last 20-30 minutes of that game on Saturday, where we needed a bit of fight and a bit of dig, but his quality at times obviously does let him down. But he's a young guy, he's from Argentina, he's in the first year of his career at Celtic. There's so many other players that we could have written off in the first year of their career at Celtic who've come good. Greg Taylor, for example. Nobody who plays in the exact same position. That's just irony. But loads of people would have happily let Greg Taylor go, and now all absolutely love Greg Taylor, and he's a fan favourite. Moy as well. I mean, we're still in season 1 of Moy, but he's had that kind of 2 seasons in one almost, where he's played a part in a defeat, and people have said he looked like he's towing a caravan. And then the second half of the season, after the World Cup, after he starred at the World Cup for his country and been arguably their best player, comes back and he's suddenly a hero with a song. Something that James Forrest has still not got, and he's been here for, 13 years or something like that.
He's a hero with a song. I like that. But you're right, we do. As football fans, that's what happens. And with Bernabe, I think it's a completely different scenario. If anybody's saying I'm being hypocritical with regards to writing off some of the Celtic careers of Ideguchi or McCarthy, whereas I'm standing up for Bernabe. But I think they're different scenarios. Bernabe at this moment in time is a second choice left back, whereas James McCarthy's 5th or 6th choice midfielder, as is Ideguchi. I'm not even sure where he stands, and Abelga right out the picture. So yeah, I'm willing to give the boy a chance, and I hope he does develop. But at the same time, I'm really looking forward to Taylor coming back because he's such an important player for us. JP, you picked out number 27 because of your affiliation to Mark Burchill, and that was Mr. B. Devlin, who goes under the Twitter handle at BDevlin67. So you've won the retro one-off concept jersey right here. I'll send you a DM and we'll get it sent out to you. There's going to be more competitions as we go throughout 2023, some big plans, one of which is live events. You can join us tomorrow night if you've got a ticket. It's a sold-out event. Or indeed, come along and see us with Danny McGrain at Gracie's in Glasgow. There's some tickets available on the link below. JP. And
we've not even spoken about Morton on Saturday.
I know. No, that we're disrespecting them, by the way.
Listen, I definitely wouldn't disrespect Morton, and there's a good reason for that. You remember when they beat us in the Cup 2013? Dougie Emery. Van Dijk was in defence, by the way, in that game.
Rogic played that night.
So there's a guy called Dave McGeechan. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but Dave McGeechan is one of the promoters at DF and is responsible for the careers of many, many bands and singers, artists in Scotland. He's promoted them from year dot, like King Tut's level, right up to Bellahouston Park. Like he's promoted Paolo Nutini from the start, the Manics, put on the Manics, like came for dinner at his house in Gourock. His mum cooked them dinner. This is with Richie Edwards, by the way.
Was he also responsible for putting on some Stone Roses gigs in the early days? Because there's a kind of Greenock-Gourock connection with the Roses somewhere along the line.
I think that might have been just before his time, because that would have been probably 88, 89. I don't think Gooch started promoting until like 90, 91, 92, that kind of time. But he put on like Suede and stuff like Ned's Atomic Dustbin, and he was involved with a band called The Smiles, who like in and around that kind of like Supernaturals, Ocean Colour Scene, that kind of thing. Like they supported them. I think played Tea in the Park. Anyway, Geach is a massive Greenock Morton fan, huge Greenock Morton fan. Like probably he would win an award for being a Greenock Morton fan if you were to stage such a competition. But he took ill in 2015. In the summer of 2015, he took ill and we very nearly lost him. He went into a coma for 3 days. And when he came to, the first thing he said was like, "Oh, the Paolo gig." And Paolo had played Bellahouston Park on Saturday, and this was on the Monday. And they were like, "It's all right, the Paolo gig's happened." And he'd lost 3 days. And that was the first thing he thought of. And Paolo came to see him in the hospital and had dedicated his set to him at Bellahouston Park. And I remember being on holiday and getting a call from my boss just saying, "It's touch and go with Geach. Just wanted to let you know." And I remember looking out at the sea and just being like, "Nah, not Geach, not him. He's an absolute legend. Surely not. I mean, the world would be a poorer place without him." And I let a few weeks go by as I heard he was recovering. So that was in the August of 2015. And so on September 24th, 2015, I get a text from Dave, but it was from his wife, Pamela. And she was like, "Hi, JP, it's Pamela on Dave's phone. He's just told me to tell you 24th of September, 2013, never forget." And he texts me every 24th of September to remind me about the Morton victory over Celtic. Just to wind me up. He's got a signed jersey from that night by all the players and a giant frame in his office at home, and it's signed all the way around, and the jerseys in the middle, and there's like a picture of Dougie Emery celebrating the goal. So you can obviously tell it means a lot to him.
Oh yeah, Alan Moore was the manager, wasn't he? Morton's manager.
I honestly don't know, but he would tell you the starting 11 and the registration plate at the bus that they drove to Celtic Park in, and all the rest of it. I mean, he's a huge. So he's going on Saturday as a guest of Celtic in the full hospitality, director's box, all the rest of it. I mean, that he's a big deal.
And superb.
I really just hope he's not got any cause for celebration on Saturday.
Let's hope he doesn't send you 2 texts a year on the same day, JP, after Saturday. It's one of the ones where I said last night, I don't know if you agree with this, I didn't mind the changes last night. Laura and I spoke before the game and we said, sometimes it can throw up some concerns. I'd be more concerned with big changes on Saturday. I think that's much more of this old cliched banana skin, right? Mm-hmm. For a number of different reasons. And I think we'll play a very, very strong side against Morton. People are thinking, throw in Vata, throw in Lavo, let's play this one and that. I don't think that's going to happen.
No. From the little bit that you got from Ange Postecoglou in the post-match last night, because they said, "Oh, can we expect changes on Saturday?" And he went, "Yeah, well, there's guys that didn't play tonight that will probably come back in, i.e. Carter Vickers and Maeda, and Moy potentially." So I don't think there's any real... we don't have European games to contend with. Do we have a midweek game next week? We don't. I don't think. So we've got a full week of recovery after Saturday till Dundee United away the following Sunday at Tannadice. Is that right?
Are you going?
No, I'm not. Twilight Sad at Fruit Market that day, so
Right.
I'll be with them there. Celtic Connections tickets still available and all that. But no, I won't be there. So we've not got a midweek game, so there's no real reason to like bring in a bunch of folk just like for the sake of it. I think there's too many good quality players that are in and around the first team, as we've discussed already.
Yeah.
Likes of Turnbull, Giacomakis, if he's still here, and like Forrest as well. There's all these guys that are far closer to the first team than just bypassing them and going for a Rocco Vata or a Lawal or whatever. I mean, I'm sure they'll probably be on the bench, and maybe some guys that have played a lot of football recently will get completely rested, like Carter Vickers and Giacomakis did last night. But like we said, it's too strong you could say the first like 17, 18, that 18 core of the squad.
Mm-hmm.
They should be playing on Saturday ahead of anybody else, regardless of the opposition. It wouldn't matter if we were playing, I don't know, like Gallifreydine or something like that on Saturday. It's more about who deserves to be playing and who should be playing. And I would imagine Turnbull will start, and 100% Turnbull will start. So.
Yeah, Turnbull, players like that, Haksabanovic, you want to see him getting a wee bit more
Another
game
one
time.
I forgot about him. Yeah.
That's the type of player that I would be expecting. And as much as I'm an advocate for the young players coming through, and people might think it's contradictory because they might say, well, when is the best time to play them? Iwata. We might see a debut for Iwata as well. Another one to throw into the mix. I'm looking forward to that, and I hope Geach enjoys it for about 17 minutes, and then you and I can enjoy it for the rest of the time as well. It's an absolute pleasure as always on a Thursday. I just can't get over the quality music that was being released 23 years ago today.
I'm gutted I never saw Primal Scream on that Exterminator tour. I know Andy from the SAD saw them at the garage on that tour. I think he won tickets. It was like a radio competition. And Primal Scream played the garage, and they had Manny and Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine playing in the live band. And he said it's up there with the best gigs he's ever seen.
That's astonishing. I'm going to ask you one final question before you go. It is music related, but you're talking about lineups, and we know that the developments this past week has resurrected the Oasis reunion gossip. If they were to reform, what's the lineup, JP? Who's the finest Oasis lineup? We know Nolan Liam's going to be in it, but who plays bass? Who's on the drums? Who's on the rhythm guitar?
Well, there seems to be bad blood between them and like Alan White. He's not really a favoured person to be mentioned in their circles anymore, which is weird. I don't think Tony McCarroll's got a hope in hell of playing in an Oasis lineup, given the history between them. I think Bonehead's a certainty. Gwig's doubtful, given that he's not kicked a ball for 20
since the 90s,
25 years maybe. I can't really see him stepping back into the fray, so it would probably be Andy Bell and Gem. I think Gem's still close with both of them. Andy Bell doesn't seem to have ruffled any feathers and is still out playing with Ride, so he's still kind of active, if you want to make a football analogy. I don't know. And maybe Zach Starkey on drums. Again, he doesn't seem to have fallen out with any of them. I don't think anyone would really be overly bothered as long as it was the core of like Bonehead, No, and Liam. I can't believe we're even saying that out loud, as if it's a possibility. I mean, if it did happen, I would genuinely love them to do a couple of Loch Lomans just to right.
Can you imagine?
Just to right the wrong of not having been at either of those two back in the day, because I kick myself all the time for not having pushed the boat out to go to one of them. Simon Donnelly was at both.
My brother's got like a whole spool of images from one of them, and it's the bottle. I've told you before with the bottle fight, and you can see in the sky just like they're raining down glass bottles, as you do. But yes, we will report. Obviously, the Acsom logo that you see in the centre of your screen, top centre, is inspired by that certain band. So we had a wee chat about them there, JP, a wee bit of music chat, and it's over the hour anyway. We're about an hour and a quarter in, so it's extra time, right? So we're allowed to speak about.
Probably shouldn't have mentioned who I'm going to see tonight at the Hydro because I'd get slagged for it. But I'm going to see the 1975 tonight at the Hydro, and I know that they're probably not considered the coolest band to like, but I've got a history with them. Like I put them on at Electric Circus almost 10 years ago to the day. Electric Circus was 250 capacity, by the way, and they're now playing to 13,500 people at the Hydro comfortably. And I just think they're a really good band, and they're heavily influenced by the Blue Nile. Like it's absolutely mental how much they're influenced by the Blue Nile, and probably about 70 or 80% of the audience tonight will have no idea who the Blue Nile are. But if you were to listen to 3-4 of their songs, you'd be like, all right, I see where that's come from. Like, yeah.
I remember doing a. Sorry, I'm actually just getting into this now, JP. We better wrap this up. I remember doing a review very early on, and the song was called, was it Sex?
Yeah.
75, early single, maybe EP.
That's the song I was sent to listen to by the promoter. It was DF were putting them on at King Tut's, and they asked me to put them on at Electric Circus. And they sent me that song, and I listened to that song, and I was like, 100%. We put it on sale. It sold 50 tickets straight away, and by the time the poster was up, it was on 150 tickets. We actually didn't need to promote it, or hardly at all. And that was like very, very. That's January 2013. That was very, very early on in their career. So,
are the extra minutes down to far? Yes, they are. Pete McGee. No, you know what it is. I've not spoken to JP since last week, so we're just catching up at the end of the show. But we are still live. Thanks everybody for getting involved. We really appreciate your support. We're way up at 750 live, which is tremendous, really, if you think about the fact that we're no longer in the midst of a lockdown. People are at their work, JP, but you're still tuning in your droves. So thank you all very much for that. Give us a big thumbs up if you want to come and see us live with Danny McGrain. The tickets are underneath. There's a link underneath this video. All that's left for me to say is once again, JP Mason, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.